Get out of here quickly. The man's voice, filled with anger, came from beside her. Tom Duyer's eyelashes trembled as she slowly opened her eyes wide, waves of pain radiating from her head. Looking at the unfamiliar faces around her, she revealed a look of confusion. What was going on? For the sake of my brother's face, I gave you one last chance. I warn you, if you use such despicable tricks again, I will not let you off. The man was evidently furious, glaring at Tom Duyer, who lay on the ground, his handsome face flushed with rage. Mason Howie, Dr. Kim, said your body. Beside her, Kieran Tan bit her lip, her big watery eyes casting an unhappy glance at Tom Duyer on the ground. Then she whispered to Jasper Morrow. Jasper Morrow had just drunk the sugar water brought by the servant, and soon his breathing became rapid, his whole body starting to heat up. At that moment, he saw Tom Duyer, dressed in a revealing nightgown, running straight into the study. How could he not understand what was happening? The foolish woman, Tom Duyer, had set a trap for him. He had always thought Tom Duyer was stupid and mindless, never expecting her to have the audacity to drug her brother-in-law. Jasper Morrow clenched his teeth, his handsome face glistening with a thin layer of sweat. Although he had taken the medicine Dr. Kim provided, it wouldn't take effect so quickly. His body still felt extremely uncomfortable. Looking at the little wife Kieran Tan beside him, his gaze darkened slightly. Taking a deep breath, Jasper Morrow instructed the servants, take Tom Duyer back. This matter should not be spoken of outside. Just let my brother know. As for our grandfather and parents, none of you can say a word. Otherwise, even if this is Tom Duyer's foolish mistake, it will still bring scandal. I absolutely do not wish for my name to be associated with her. Jasper Morrow's sharp gaze was enough to frighten the two servants, who quickly bowed their heads and replied, yes, young master. Watching the two servants help Tom Duyer away, Jasper Morrow then held Kieran Tan's hand. Help him. The look in his eyes made it clear. Kieran Tan's fair face flushed, a wave of heat radiating from her palm. She shyly nodded. What happened tonight might not be a bad thing for her. Meanwhile, Tom Duyer was being supported by the two servants, her whole body aching, waves of pain radiating from her head. It was evident that she had fallen hard just now. The original owner probably died from the impact to her head. After struggling to absorb the memories, Tom Duyer gradually became more alert. She realized she had crossed into a book. Originally, she had only read a sweet romance novel to kill time, but unexpectedly, after a nap, she found herself inside the story. In the book, the previous female lead married the overbearing CEO, who was the male lead's brother, but the female lead's life was extremely miserable. Every day, she faced a blind man who was disfigured, living in fear and humiliation, and receiving disdain. In her second life, the female lead, Kieran Tan, refused to let herself fall into the same predicament as before. At a banquet, she used cunning tricks to marry the male lead, while the female antagonist replaced her and married the previous male lead, who was akin to a demon. After their marriage, the male lead was always concerned about the fact that the female lead had once been his brother's fiancée. However, Tom Duyer knew that later on, the male lead not only cherished the female lead deeply, but was even willing to sacrifice his life to save her in times of danger. Their beautiful love story was indeed enviable. As for her, she had crossed over as the person who married into the Jang family at the same time as the female lead, always despising her husband for being ugly and blind, daydreaming about climbing into her brother-in-law's bed, dancing around, and using despicable tricks to trap the female lead. What had just happened was straight out of the book. The female antagonist drugged the male lead, only to be discovered and reported by him. The original owner not only gained nothing, but also fell down the stairs in her hasty escape, truly becoming a stepping stone. At this moment, the two servants were doing their best to support Tom Duyer, their eyes hiding disdain. They led Tom Duyer through a patch of greenery, down a long corridor, and into the Western-style house in the back garden. At the door, one servant cautiously knocked. After a long while, they dared to open the door and help Tom Duyer inside. They placed Tom Duyer on the sofa, and then one servant looked towards a figure inside, feeling a shiver run down her spine. She quickly lowered her head, nervously speaking to inform the person of what had happened that night. Tom Duyer was half lying on the sofa, her whole body aching, her head pounding. Hearing the servant beside her speak, she lifted her head to look at the figure. In front of the large floor-to-ceiling window, a man sat in a black chair, the room dimly lit by a small lamp, the dark gray curtains blocking out all outside light, making the house seem even gloomier. Tom Duyer leaned against the soft sofa, cold sweat trickling down her back. The book mentioned the original owner's fiancée, a young man who had made a name for himself. After taking over the Mason Howie family's business, the Hang Nguyen Group, he had increased the company's profits by several times. Some had even covertly targeted him, but those people ended up either going mad, becoming disabled, or dying. In the business world, no one dared to directly challenge the Mason Howie family's eldest son, Jang Tony. After all, everyone feared being bitten by this ruthless man. In the end, it was unknown whether heaven had taken a disliking to him, but during an unexpected fire, Jang Tony was not only disfigured but also lost his eyesight. After Jang Tony's incident, almost all the powerful figures in the high society breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, the man who had once terrified the entire high society of City B was sitting not far away. Tom Duyer's gaze shifted, secretly raising her eyes to assess him. But since he was sitting in the dark, she couldn't see his face clearly. "Get lost." The servant had just finished speaking when the man's cold voice rang out. The servant trembled slightly and quickly replied, "Understood, young master. We will leave immediately." The two servants, looking panicked, stumbled out, closing the door behind them. The room fell into silence. Tom Duyer was in pain, but didn't dare to complain, her nerves tense as she watched the man by the floor-to-ceiling window stand up and walk towards her step by step. He wasn't coming over to hit her, was he? Her body unconsciously trembled a little, and Tom Duyer opened her mouth to explain. No one could hear that their wife had drugged her brother-in-law without being angry. As Tom Duyer stood there in shock, the tall figure walked to the edge of the bed and then laid down straight. The house fell silent once more. Tom Duyer felt a bit dazed. She recalled that in the book, it merely described the poor relationship between the male antagonist and the female antagonist, never expecting that even if the original owner was a fool, this husband wouldn't care. Tom Duyer lay on the sofa, her eyes longing as she looked at the large dark gray bed in the room. According to the original owner's memories, she had always slept on the sofa, which felt quite suffocating. Tom Duyer sniffled, her body and head still aching, so she prepared to rest for the night on the sofa and deal with things tomorrow. The next morning, the sunlight was blocked by the dark gray curtains outside, leaving the room dim and heavy. She could hear the sound of women chatting, their voices clear and pleasant, but it annoyed Tom Duyer, who was trying to sleep. She turned over, wanting to avoid the noisy sound, but since the sofa wasn't very spacious, especially for her current figure, as soon as she turned, Tom Duyer fell to the floor. The girl nearby saw Tom Dyer's awkward state on the ground and smirked, her eyes filled with mockery. "Young master, the young mistress is awake." This girl is Haley Thorne, helping Jang Tony prepare breakfast with one hand while speaking softly. She heard another maid mention that last night, Tom Duyer shamelessly drugged the second young master. TSK. Only Tom Duyer could do something so foolish. Her distracted gaze flickered over Jang Tony's face, and Haley Thorne's heart trembled. She quickly lowered her eyelashes. "Get lost." Suddenly, the man roared. Tom Duyer felt pain all over her body but dared not complain. Her nerves tense as she watched the man by the floor-to-ceiling window stand up and walk over step by step. He wasn't coming over to hit her, was he? Her body involuntarily trembled a bit, and Tom Duyer opened her mouth to explain. As Tom Duyer stood there in shock, the tall figure walked to the edge of the bed and then laid down straight. The house fell into silence again. Tom Duyer felt a bit dazed. She thought of the books, which only briefly described the poor relationship between the female lead and her husband. She never expected that even if the original owner was a fool, this husband wouldn't care at all. Tom Duyer lay on the sofa, her eyes longing as she looked at the large dark gray bed in the room. According to the original owner's memories, she had always slept on the sofa, which felt really suffocating. Tom Duyer sniffed, her body and head still aching, so she prepared to rest for the night on the sofa, planning to deal with things after waking up the next day. The next morning, the sunlight was blocked by the dark gray curtains outside, leaving the house dim and heavy with darkness. The sound of women chatting reached her ears, melodious yet annoying, making Tom Duyer, who was still sleeping, feel quite irritated. She turned over, wanting to escape the noisy sound, but because the sofa was not very spacious, especially for her current body, as soon as she turned, Tom Duyer fell to the ground. The girl saw Tom Duyer struggling on the ground and smirked, her eyes filled with mockery. "Young master, the young mistress is awake." This girl was Haley Thorne, who was helping Jang Tony set up breakfast while whispering. She had heard other servants say that last night Tom Duyer shamelessly drugged the second young master. TSK. Only Tom Duyer could do something so foolish. Her gaze absent-mindedly flicked over Jang Tony's face, and Haley Thorne felt a shiver run through her. Only this ugly and foolish woman was worthy of being with the young master before her. Get lost. Suddenly, the man roared. Young master, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm really sorry. Haley Thorne quickly retracted her hand, gripping it tightly. Just now, distracted, she had accidentally brushed against Jang Tony's hand. It was said that someone who had touched Jang Tony before was now left with only 8 fingers. The other 2. Haley Thorne's face turned pale, cold sweat breaking out. Young master, I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. Please don't chop off my hand. Haley Thorne's face turned pale, cold sweat breaking out. Young master, I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. Please don't chop off my hand. I said get lost. Jang Tony's expression was emotionless, his thin lips curling up, his voice cold to the extreme. Haley Thorne bit her lip, too scared to say anything more, hurriedly retreating in panic, even forgetting to take the tray. On the ground, Tom Duyer curled up in pain, unable to suppress a groan. It hurt so much. At first, she thought a good sleep would make it better, but she didn't expect her whole body to hurt even more. Meanwhile, the man, hearing her cry out in pain, showed no concern, leisurely enjoying his breakfast. Tom Duyer gritted her teeth, wanting to crawl onto the sofa, when suddenly a bell rang in her head. What the hell? Tom Duyer immediately covered her ears with her hands. It was so noisy. However, the sound of the bell was strikingly similar to the school bell from her past, ringing incessantly in her mind. With her brows tightly furrowed, Tom Duyer felt her head throbbing more and more, as if her soul was about to separate from her body. Jang Tony, can you help me call a doctor? My head hurts so much. The pain was becoming increasingly intense, and Tom Duyer had no doubt that she might die in the next moment. But at the dining table, Jang Tony remained indifferent, continuing to eat breakfast. Not receiving a response, Tom Duyer looked up, and because it was daytime, she could clearly see Jang Tony's appearance. Her pupils slightly constricted, Tom Duyer stared blankly at him. His straight back and the way he ate with such grace were indescribably elegant. However, when her gaze landed on his face, her admiration immediately vanished. In the books, it was described that Jang Tony's face was burned. She saw a scar on the left side of his face that stretched from his temple to his chin, a pinkish scar that was uneven and somewhat resembled raw flesh, fierce and repulsive. Jang Tony slowly chewed his food, his dark eyes lacking any focus, and he was ugly, exuding a sinister and cold aura that made others shiver in fear. Tom Duyer hid her shock deep in her eyes. The sound of the bell continued to ring in her head, the pain causing cold sweat to bead on her forehead. Tom Duyer opened her mouth again. Jang Tony, help me. She knew that Jang Tony had a doctor who specialized in treating his eyes. With just a phone call, the doctor would come immediately. The original owner had hit her head in a fall yesterday, and now her head hurt so much. Plus, hearing the bell, it was obviously a manifestation of aftereffects, causing hallucinations. Are you having a headache? The man finally responded, his voice cold yet pleasant to hear. Yes, it hurts so much. Jang Tony, please help me call the doctor. Tom Duyer was in so much pain that tears were streaming from the corners of her eyes. Jang Tony still scooped up a piece of sweet cake, putting it in his mouth, and after a long while, he slowly opened his mouth. Then what does that have to do with me? His casual remark made the listener's heart tremble. With trembling eyelashes, Tom Duyer looked at the expressionless face before her. His deep black eyes sent a chill down her spine. She knew that what he said was the truth. He basically didn't care whether she lived or died. Tom Duyer bit her lip, and after their direct interaction, she realized that this male lead, Jang Tony, was even colder than described in the book. At that moment, the ringing in her head continued unabated, causing her features to tighten in discomfort. No, she couldn't wait any longer. She needed to get to the hospital. If she delayed any further, she might just collapse in a few seconds. Tom Duyer struggled to stand up, then reached for her bag placed on the sofa and next to the small table, ready to head out. Just then, a short and clumsy figure approached. A little classmate was cradling a white cat in her arms, walking somewhat unsteadily, making Tom Duyer suspect that the cat might fall to the ground at any moment. Oomph. As the little classmate passed by Tom Duyer, her small nose wrinkled in disdain, and she let out a cold huff before walking over to the table beside Jang Tony, looking up at him with big eyes and saying sweetly, "Daddy, good morning." This little one was Jang Dine. She placed the cat at her feet and then waddled over to the corner of the room, straining to pull a chair toward her before plopping down. On the table, there was only a bowl of fish porridge and a plate of bread left. Jang Dine's big, shiny eyes scanned the table, and upon not seeing any cake, She pouted, knowing that her father had eaten it all. She could only stretch her short arms to bring the fish porridge closer, bowing her little head and quietly eating her breakfast. Meow, meow. The cat obediently waited beside her, lazily dozing off. A blind person with a ruined face, a cold child, and a cat that loved to sleep. A combination that was truly absurd. But Tom Duyer didn't have the mood to pay attention to them. She needed to get to the hospital. Just as she stepped out of the room, Tom Duyer suddenly paused, astonished. Her head didn't hurt. The noisy ringing had vanished. How strange. Just a moment ago, she was in excruciating pain, and now it felt as if nothing had happened. Tom Duyer reached up to touch her injured forehead, which had only been hastily bandaged by the doctor yesterday. Logically, touching the wound should have hurt a lot, but there was not a hint of pain at all. Tom Duyer relaxed her brow, realizing that her body was fine despite rolling down the stairs. What was going on? A sudden improvement? Tom Duyer stood there in shock, turning to look at Jang Tony and Jang Dai. Was it because of this little brat? Ever since she appeared, her head stopped hurting. Tom Duyer recalled the plot points in the book. Most of it described the romantic storyline between the male and female leads, with only a few mentions of the supporting male character Jang Tony and his child Jang Dai. Tom Duyer pursed her lips, thinking about the original character. Her fate wasn't much better than the two sitting across from her. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from her stomach. After rolling around all night, she hadn't eaten anything this morning. Looking at the little one over there, quietly enjoying her breakfast, Tom Duyer tossed her bag onto the sofa and walked over to the table. If she was fine now, there was no rush to go to the hospital. She should fill her stomach first. This is mine. Seeing the other person sitting down casually across from her and reaching for her bun, Jang Dai's small face turned serious. Tom Duyer, with a fluid motion, picked up a steamed bun filled with egg and milk, tore off a piece, popped it in her mouth, and smiled at the wide-eyed little boy staring at her, saying, "What's wrong? Can't you eat the breakfast from the kitchen over there?" If it weren't for Jang Tony sitting beside her, Tom Duyer would have loved to reach out and pinch the angry little face. In the book, after Jang Tony died, the fate of the female supporting character wasn't any better. When the male lead took over the Hang Nguyen group, he dealt ruthlessly with the female supporting character who often clung to him, leading to her family's bankruptcy and throwing her into a mental hospital. Thinking of such a tragic ending, Tom Duyer bit her lip. She had no inappropriate thoughts about the male lead and wasn't interested in getting involved in the romance between the main characters. She'd just been thinking about whether the male lead might target her in the future, but she didn't want to end up like that. Jang Tony must not die. As long as he was around, even if he was blind, the male lead would still be cautious of Jang Tony and wouldn't act too harshly toward her. With that thought, Tom Duyer turned to look at Jang Tony. The light in the room was dim, but she could still clearly see the scar on the left side of his face, which only made him look worse. Tom Duyer smiled. She didn't mind that he was both ugly and blind. "Your breakfast is in the lobby. This is my breakfast with Daddy." At that moment, Jang Dai tightly pursed her small lips. Was she angry? Seeing Tom Duyer eating her breakfast, the little girl cast a pitiful glance at Jang Tony, her big, dark eyes looking sorrowful, but she didn't dare to complain out loud. Tom Duyer knew that the relationship between the original character and Jang Tony and Jang Dai wasn't good, and hearing the little one say that, she didn't feel angry. "Today, I want to eat with you too. Don't you welcome me?" She took a bite of the bun while smiling at the little girl. Jang Dai's face turned bright red with anger. The boy lowered his head, saying nothing as he continued to eat the porridge in his bowl. That which seemed different today. Clearly, just the day before, she had poked him with her finger, telling him to roll away a bit and not come near her, even loudly scolding him as a bastard. His small hands tightly gripped the spoon, and his brows furrowed deeply. That which definitely had ulterior motives. He wouldn't fall for her tricks. Meanwhile, Jang Tony remained expressionless from head to toe. He took a sip of lemonade, then wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin before standing up and walking to the study like a normal person. When Jang Dai saw his father leave, he immediately lifted his small head and glared fiercely at Tom Duyer, then jumped off the armchair, picked up the white cat from the ground, and said, "Herb Green, let's go." He couldn't stay close to that witch, otherwise she might hit him again. After saying that, he hugged the cat Herb Green and slowly ran away. Tom Duyer took a bite of the bun, realizing that she really made everyone dislike her. The early summer sunlight was still gentle. Occasionally a cool breeze blew by, refreshing and pleasant. Standing in front of the full-length mirror, Tom Duyer felt no joy at all. From the books, she knew that the female supporting character was not beautiful. Her existence was merely to highlight the kind and beautiful female lead. But at this moment, looking at her reflection in the mirror, she felt utterly disheartened. Her figure was not much different from before, standing about 168 centimeters tall, but now this body had grown quite plump, not in a curvy, attractive way, but just fat. Moreover, her skin was relatively dark, making her look both dark and chubby, with a round face that had nothing to do with the word beautiful. Tom Duyer frowned unhappily, looking at her reflection in the mirror. The more she looked, the uglier she felt. She wanted to cry. Before crossing over here, her appearance was among the best in the entertainment industry, fully deserving of the title, the most beautiful vase. Countless people pursued her. Just by her looks, she could have landed the leading role, and with her acting skills, if it weren't for her short time in the industry and her young age, she would have long since become a best actress. However, after an unfortunate incident, a fire on set left her severely burned. Her face was almost destroyed, and her body also suffered burns over a large area. At that time, her burns were much more severe than Jang Tony's, which was why she didn't feel scared about Jang Tony's appearance. Now that she thought about it, there were some benefits to crossing over. At least her body was quite healthy. Although her skin was dark, it had no blemishes, no scars or tattoos. Thinking this way, Tom Duyer relaxed and smiled. The sunlight fell into the courtyard, and the early summer rays illuminated the flowers, making them even more beautiful and dewy. Last night, Tom Duyer hadn't seen the surrounding terrain clearly, but now that she stepped outside, she discovered that this room was very far from the villa on the other side. In her memory, Grandpa Jang had moved Jang Tony into this back garden for better treatment. Jang Tony had no objections, but the original owner felt he was being exiled. The original owner was deeply affected by the fact that she couldn't marry the male lead, Jang Mosen. She was resentful, wondering why Kieran Tan could marry Jang Mosen while she had to marry a blind man whose looks were ruined and had to live in a distant villa. The original owner was both angry and resentful, but never extinguished her hope for the male lead, constantly thinking of ways to win him over. Every morning, she would run to the villa on the other side for meals, just to catch a glimpse of the male lead, looking for opportunities to approach him, often mocking the poor female lead. The paths were filled with blooming flowers, and after walking for a few minutes, Tom Duyer finally reached the front courtyard. The central courtyard featured a large fountain, and under the sunlight, the water sprayed out, scattering brilliant reflections. Tom Duyer squinted against the light. At that moment, Jang Mosen walked out of the room. Seeing her standing in the small pathway, a look of disgust flashed across his handsome face. As he passed by Tom Duyer, he stopped, coldly saying, "Tom Duyer, I advise you to behave yourself and not to harbor any delusions about me. Even if you try to run into me every day, I will never value someone as foolish as you." This woman repulsed him to the extreme. She had just set a trap for him yesterday, and today she still had the face to come here. Tom Duyer, right? She remembered that the original owner often waited by the fountain to see Jang Mosen, as this was the path he had to take when going out. Now, under Jang Mosen's cold gaze, Tom Duyer frowned. "I hope you don't overthink it." Jang Mosen was indeed exceptionally handsome, tall and slender, exuding an outstanding gentlemanly aura. No wonder the original owner liked him so much. But Tom Duyer had been in the chaotic entertainment industry for so long, interacting with many male celebrities daily, and she was not swayed by the man before her at all. A mocking smile lifted her lips, and Jang Mosen shot her a cold glance. If it weren't for the fact that she was Jang Tony's wife, he would have long since chased this foolish woman away. After giving Tom Duyer a warning, Jang Mosen left with an icy demeanor. Tom Duyer pouted. The next time she saw Jang Mosen, she would definitely keep her distance. Entering the room, Tom Duyer wanted to inform the kitchen that starting from noon today, she would be dining at the Little Yang Villa, and they could directly send her meal over there. Jang Tony and the little rascal Jang Dine were eating over there, so there was no reason for her to shamelessly run to the main hall to have her meal alone. "Haley, I really envy you for being so leisurely every day." A servant approached Haley Thorne, expressing her admiration. "Envy me? Then let's switch places." Haley Thorne replied, casually while looking at her freshly manicured nails. She had spent several hundred yuan on this manicure, a luxury she would never have dared to indulge in before. But since coming to work at the Jang family, her pay was twice as high as what she earned at the upscale hospital, and her quality of life had improved significantly. "Don't joke around." The servant quickly waved her hand. "That's not possible. Everyone knows how the eldest master is. You've been by his side the longest. If the eldest master weren't more." "Don't joke around." The servant quickly waved her hand. "That's not possible. Everyone knows how the eldest master is. You've been by his side the longest. If the eldest master weren't married, Who knows, you might even... Haley Thorne disagreed. Before coming to the Jang family, she had similar thoughts, but after seeing Jang Tony, she completely lost that notion. She didn't want to face a disfigured face and a blind person for the rest of her life, just because she thought she was beautiful. How could a blind person appreciate that? Moreover, with Jang Tony's temperament, who could stand it? Don't talk nonsense. Only Tom Duyer could be worthy of Jang Tony, Haley Thorne said with a hint of sarcasm. The servant thought of Tom Dyer's figure and her disfigured face and couldn't help but laugh. You're right, I think. The servant thought of Tom Dyer's figure and her disfigured face and couldn't help but laugh. You're right, I think. The servant's voice suddenly fell silent. She stared blankly as Tom Duyer walked in through the door. Madam, madam. The servant immediately lowered her head. Are you discussing me? Tom Dyer's gaze was deep as she looked at the two of them. Haley Thorne was much calmer than the person beside her. We were just praising how well the madam and the eldest master match. She knew Tom Duyer hated it when others compared her to Jang Tony. By responding this way, she would clearly provoke Tom Duyer, but she felt no fear towards her. Before Haley Thorne entered the Jang family, they had dismissed at least 20 caregivers for Jang Tony. Not because they were incompetent, but simply because Jang Tony didn't like them. She was the one who fit Jang Tony's requirements the best. In front of Jang Tony, she was confident that she had a higher status than Tom Duyer, who was merely called his wife. Is that so? Tom Duyer faced Haley Thorne's somewhat smug eyes, her tone indifferent. I thought you all underwent professional training to enter the Jang family, and you must know that it's against the rules to evaluate the master. Is that so? Tom Duyer faced Haley Thorne's somewhat smug eyes, her tone indifferent. I thought you all underwent professional training to enter the Jang family, and you must know that it's against the rules to evaluate the master. Wait. Haley Thorne was somewhat taken aback. She thought Tom Duyer would be angry. Shut up. I don't like hearing others argue. Tom Duyer had been in the entertainment industry long enough to be adept at reading people's expressions and moods. Just like the servant in front of her, whose expression was restrained, she could see through the other's thoughts with just a glance. Haley Thorne's breath caught in her throat, and she secretly resented it. Starting from noon today, I will be dining at the Little Yang Villa. You can directly bring my meal over there with Jang Tony. Madam, I'm really sorry. I'm only responsible for the daily needs of the young master, and you... In her heart, Haley Thorne looked down on Tom Duyer, who was both ugly and dim-witted, and she didn't want to serve her. It seems I truly have no status in the Jang family. Even a small task like delivering food is being refused by you all. I wonder if I should ask the butler to hire someone specifically to deliver my meals. Tom Duyer said lightly. Upon hearing this, Haley Thorne's face immediately flushed red, feeling both embarrassed and aggrieved. There's no need to hire anyone else, madam. I can handle such a small task. Is that so? Then I'll leave it to you. Recently, I want to lose weight, so please make the food a bit lighter. Tom Duyer assigned the task, and then left, ignoring Haley Thorne's unwilling expression, which looked as if she had just stepped in something unpleasant. Not far from the Little Yang Villa, there was a simple swing made of rope and a piece of wood. It seemed that no one had used it for a long time, as the color of the wood had changed and was covered in dust. At that moment, Jang Dine came over, holding Rao Tom, and placed on the swing. Rao Tom, are you done sitting? Dime will push you. The little one didn't have much strength. His chubby hands clumsily held the rope, and the swing only swayed slightly. Did you have fun playing, Rao Tom? The little boy's big, shiny black eyes were filled with envy. Jang Dine had wanted to play on the swing for a long time, but he couldn't climb up by himself, nor did he have anyone to help him push the swing. Little master, why are you out here playing? This swing is really dirty. Don't touch it. Haley Thorne pulled Jang Dine away, noticing his small hands were indeed covered in dust. Haley Thorne pulled Jang Dine away, noticing his small hands were indeed covered in dust. The little hands of Jang Dine curled up a bit, feeling a bit shy looking at his dirty hands. Little master, I'll take you to wash your hands. We still need to eat later, Haley Thorne said gently. Haley Thorne said gently. Jang Dine turned around, picked up Rao Tom, who was still lying on the swing, and said, Rao Tom, let's go wash our hands and get ready to eat. He loved mealtime the most because he could stay by his dad's side then. Haley Thorne took Jang Dine to the restroom. She glanced outside and then slowly closed the door. Setting Rao Tom down on the floor, the chubby little arms began washing their hands, scrubbing and applying soap. The little hands quickly turned back to being clean and fair. I'm done washing. Jang Dine shook off the water still on his hands, then bent down to pick up Rao Tom. Little master, wait a moment. Haley Thorne stopped him. Jang Dine's face froze. He looked up at her, asking innocently, what's wrong? Haley Thorne crouched halfway down, looking into the round eyes, and said, "Young master, Madam Tom Duyer has instructed me to do something. If I don't follow her orders, she will fire me, and then there will be no one to take care of young Master Jang Tony. No, you can't go." Jang Dai knew that his father, who was blind, needed someone to look after him. The child was a bit anxious and said in a childish tone, "You can't leave right now. Dine Dine is still small. Dine Dine will grow up quickly and then take care of Daddy." "Of course, I don't want to leave." Haley Thorne reached out, and through a thin layer of clothing, she pinched the child's flesh hard. "The young mistress really dislikes you, saying you're not obedient, so I'll have to punish you a little. Don't cry. If you cry, I'll have to leave immediately." She let go and moved to another spot to continue pinching. "This is our secret. You can't tell anyone, otherwise I'll be fired." The skin of children is very fair, delicate, and sensitive, so even a light touch would make them cry out in pain. Now being pinched by an adult, how could such fragile skin endure such pain? The pain coursed through his body, and even though the little guy usually seemed cold, he still curled up his small belly in discomfort. His big eyes immediately filled with tears, and Jang Dine tightly bit his small lip, trying not to cry, knowing that if he did, there would be no one to take care of his father. "But it hurts so much. Dine Dine hurts so much." "Meow, meow, meow," Herb Green anxiously called out from the side. "But it hurts so much. Dine Dine hurts so much. Dine Dine hurts so much." "Meow, meow, meow," Herb Green anxiously called out from the side. At noon, after Tom Duyer finished her doctor's appointment, she returned. The results of her physical examination showed no issues, and the ringing in her ears that the doctor mentioned this morning was just a hallucination. As long as she applied the medicine on her forehead regularly, she would return to normal. The room was very quiet, the curtains drawn tightly, and the light inside was much dimmer than outside. Clearly, the sun was shining brightly outside, but inside the house, there was a heavy, ominous atmosphere that was frightening. Tom Duyer assessed her surroundings. The room was large, but extremely empty, dominated by brown tones, very monotonous, and extremely reminiscent of Jang Tony's style. In the room, her belongings were pitifully few. The original owner had lived here for nearly half a year, and although she was the mistress, it felt more like she was a guest. Tom Duyer tossed her handbag onto the sofa and directly walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, pulling aside the heavy dark gray curtains. The bright sunlight outside flooded in, instantly warming the room and gradually dispelling the chill and gloom. At this moment, it felt like a room where normal people lived. A satisfied look appeared in Tom Dyer's eyes as she noticed a porcelain vase on the shelf and went outside. When she returned, she had a bouquet of fresh flowers in her hand. Tom Duyer arranged the flowers in the vase and then placed it on the table, instantly adding a touch of life to the dim room. Young Master Jang Tony doesn't like this kind of decoration. At the door, Haley Thorne came in with a lunchbox and, seeing Tom Duyer playing with the vase, couldn't help but speak up. Behind her, Jang Dine also lowered his head and followed inside, this time without holding her green. "I like it, so it's fine." Tom Duyer didn't pay much attention to Haley Thorne's words. She was the mistress of this place. Didn't she have the right to arrange flowers? Haley Thorne thought of how assertive Tom Duyer was in the kitchen and didn't say anything more, instead going to the dining table to start arranging the food. "Where is Jang Tony?" Tom Duyer asked. "Young Master Jang Tony is in the study next door. I'll have him come here to eat." Since she started working for the Jang family, she had never seen Jang Tony step out of this house, probably because he knew he was blind and didn't want to scare people with his looks. "No need, I'll go call him." Compared to the bedroom, the study was not much better, even darker and gloomier. The man sat behind the desk, eyes closed and motionless, as if frozen. Darkness enveloped his body, giving off a sense that it might swallow him whole. "Have you been sitting there since morning?" "Jang Tony, it's time to eat." Although Tom Duyer was not conventionally attractive, her voice was in stark contrast to her appearance. It was truly very pleasant to hear. Soft and gentle, like a sweet voice from the Jiangnan region, it felt incredibly clean. In the darkness, the man showed no reaction, as if he were asleep. Tom Duyer approached, reaching out to shake him awake. The next moment, he suddenly opened his eyes wide, startling Tom Duyer so that her hand trembled. She calmed her racing heart, slowly withdrew her hand. "Jang Tony, it's time to eat." The girl's voice drifted into his ear, and Jang Tony instinctively frowned. Stepping out of the study, Jang Tony skillfully walked to the table, sitting down in a chair. However, he quickly realized something was off. Previously, the atmosphere around him had always been cold, but now he felt warmth in the air, as if sunlight. At the same time, besides the smell of food, he also caught a whiff of flowers. Jang Tony furrowed his brows tightly, and the scar on the left side of his face pulled taut, making it look even worse. Haley Thorne, with a cheerful expression, immediately replied, "These were picked by the young mistress. I'll take them away right now. Throw the flowers away." Haley Thorne, with a cheerful expression, immediately replied, "These were picked by the young mistress. I'll take them away right now." She cast a somewhat smug glance at Tom Duyer before reaching out to grab the vase. "Wait a moment." Tom Duyer opened her mouth to stop her, but the next second, a sharp pain shot through her head, and the ringing in her ears echoed in her mind. Anger value, 30. Tom Duyer looked astonished. What? The sound in her head faded away, leaving only the loud ringing that made her head throb. What was the value of anger? Tom Duyer couldn't imagine it and looked up, her gaze landing on Haley Thorne's face, which was subtly smug, then flicking past Haley Thorne, who was looking down, and finally resting on Jang Tony. Was it because of Jang Tony? Was her headache and the noise in her brain due to Jang Tony's anger? What kind of plot twist was this? Why wasn't this mentioned at all in the book? At that moment, she could still endure the pain, but the ringing was too loud. Tom Duyer pretended to be calm and said, "Why do you want to throw the flowers away?" Jang Tony turned his face towards her and coldly replied, "Tom Duyer, what game are you playing? Do you really think that making me die will allow you to be with Jang Mosen? Why would I want to make you die?" Tom Duyer completely misunderstood Jang Mosen's intentions. "I just arranged some flowers. The atmosphere in a room was a bit gloomy, so I brought back some flowers to make the place up. I just arranged some flowers. The atmosphere in a room was a bit gloomy, so I brought back some flowers to make the place look less desolate. Is that enough to make you die?" Since they were sitting relatively close, Tom Duyer was slightly surprised when she met Jang Tony's eyes. His dark eyes had lost their luster, becoming dull and gray, but they were still as beautiful as jade. They even had the shape of the peach blossom eyes she liked. Tom Duyer could only imagine how stunning those eyes would be if they still had light in them. "I'm allergic to pollen." Jang Tony's tone was extremely cold. He basically couldn't touch flowers. The consequences could even be life-threatening. This wasn't a secret. Anyone who asked would know, yet Tom Duyer pretended to be ignorant. Tom Duyer was taken aback. "I didn't know." Moreover, there were many flowers planted outside the villa. So how could she have thought that he couldn't touch flowers at all? So, did he think she wanted to harm him, which is why he was angry? "I'm really sorry. I didn't know you were allergic to pollen. I've been married for over half a year, and no one has ever mentioned this to me." Tom Dyer's tone was sincere. "I arranged the flowers just to make the room look a bit nicer." Tom Duyer pursed her lips, seriously looking at the cold face in front of her. "Jang Tony, I never thought about harming my husband. Even the original owner, although she disliked Jang Tony, didn't want to harm him. Do you think I would believe you?" Tom Duyer slightly parted her lips, wanting to explain, but at that moment, her head suddenly felt normal, and a loud ringing had disappeared. Anger value, 0. She couldn't imagine looking at Jang Tony. Was he no longer angry? Was he that easy to placate? However, the headache and the ringing were indeed because of him. Tom Duyer frowned. What was going on? If Jang Tony was angry, she had to bear the consequences. Did this mean she would always have to follow him around and soothe him until he calmed down? Tom Duyer suppressed the various questions in her heart and looked up at Haley Thorne. "Take the flowers away and throw them out." Did this mean she would always have to follow him around and soothe him until he calmed down? Tom Duyer suppressed the various questions in her heart and looked up at Haley Thorne. "Take the flowers away and throw them out. What are you dazed about?" Tom Dyer's voice was pleasant, but her tone was not good. "As Jang Tony's bodyguard, you must know he's allergic to pollen. Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Tom Duyer glanced at Jang Tony, wanting him to see that she truly didn't know. Haley Thorne didn't expect Tom Duyer to be so shameless, trying to evade responsibility at this moment. She had to respond, "I thought as the young mistress, you would know since you are Jang Tony's wife. I underestimated it before. In the future, if there's anything I need to pay attention to, you, as the bodyguard, must remind me in time." Tom Duyer calmly admitted her mistake, making it impossible for others to refute. Haley Thorne could only swallow her grievances. Earlier, Tom Duyer had said she wanted to lose weight, so the food laid out in front of her was all vegetarian, not a single piece of meat in sight. She looked at Jang Tony and the little one in front of her. They were eating shrimp, steamed fish, and braised pork ribs. Losing weight, back in the entertainment industry, to maintain her figure, her diet was strictly managed by her agent, so she could still endure such a meager diet now. Tom Duyer glanced at the fish on the table. It looked fresh and fatty. She picked the bones out of the fish and placed half a small bowl of fish meat in front of Jang Tony. "Jang Tony, the fish is very fresh today. I've removed the bones, so you can eat it with peace of mind." Originally, Tom Duyer planned to live harmoniously with Jang Tony. Now that she knew she couldn't provoke him to anger, she wanted to establish a good relationship with him even more. Otherwise, if he got angry or upset, the one who would suffer would be her and no one else. Jang Tony was basically unmoved. "I don't eat fish." Remembering the last time, this woman had called him, her voice sharp, scolding him for being blind, saying she couldn't even swallow food looking at his face. Now, she was enduring her disgust to serve him food. What was her intention? "You don't eat fish?" Tom Duyer wanted to ask why the kitchen had brought fish over if he didn't eat it. However, in an instant, she remembered he was allergic to pollen, but there were plenty of flowers planted outside the villa. Was this not for his recovery, but a disguised form of confinement? It seemed that the Jang family had many things she didn't know. Jang Tony didn't respond, and Tom Duyer didn't feel embarrassed. She placed a fish in a small bowl in front of Haley Thorne, then let Aunt feed little Leo. The small face that had been quietly eating rice lifted its head upon hearing this, its mouth moving slightly as it said, "I don't want to eat fish either. That's not allowed. Fish is very nutritious and the best for children to eat. Little Leo needs to eat so he can grow up quickly," Tom Duyer said gently to the child. Jang Tony currently felt a strong dislike for Tom Duyer, but was also afraid of her. At this moment, seeing Haley Thorne just throw the flowers away made his body tremble slightly, and his small stomach still hurt a bit. His little face was tightly scrunched up, and his eyes were filled with grievance as he clumsily scooped fish into his mouth with a silver spoon. Tom Duyer could naturally see that this little guy was truly resisting her. When the original owner had just married Jang Tony, Jang Tony was very happy about having a mother, but also worried. All the other little friends had mothers, and he wanted one too. However, he had heard the servants say that stepmothers were all as cruel as witches, who liked to hit and scold little children. So he gradually went from being happy to being worried. Sure enough, the original owner treated Jang Tony's son as if he were invisible. When Jang Tony approached her, she not only shooed him away, but also scolded him, calling him a bastard. After several instances like this, Jang Tony understood that this mother did not like him at all. It didn't matter. He didn't like her either. It was fine if he didn't play with his stepmother. Tom Duyer, while eating tasteless greens, thought about how to improve her relationship with this little guy. She really liked children, especially cute little ones like him, wishing she could hold him in her hands and pamper him endlessly. "Is it delicious?" Tom Duyer looked at the little face of the boy, expressionless as he ate the fish, his sulky face extremely similar to Jang Tony's. "Not delicious." Jang Tony was an honest child. After saying this, he quickly covered his small mouth in fear, his big eyes secretly glancing at Haley Thorne, who was standing nearby. "Children shouldn't be picky eaters." Tom Duyer smiled. "If there's a chance, I'll make you some fish soup with pine nuts. My cooking skills are quite good, you know." She liked to cook, and perhaps she had a talent for it, as whatever she made tasted delicious. However, in the past, she was always busy with work, so she didn't have many opportunities to cook. Jang Tony stuffed his mouth full of fish, making his cheeks puff out, his big dark eyes wide open, staring in disbelief at Tom Duyer, who was the first woman to speak to him so gently. "Little young master, your hands are dirty. Little young master, your hands are dirty." At this moment, Haley Thorne spoke up, softly reminding Jang Tony, "Let me take you to wash your hands." Jang Tony's body trembled, his big eyes instantly becoming watery as he looked at Jang Tony with grievance. "Let's go, little young master. I'll help you peel the shrimp later." Haley Thorne approached, preparing to take his hand. Tom Duyer glanced at the little boy's hands. He had just grabbed a large shrimp to peel, and they were indeed quite greasy. She smiled and said, "Little Leo, go wash your hands. Do you want to eat shrimp? Let me peel it for you." Jang Tony lowered his head, his small mouth tightly shut, losing all color, as he was taken to the toilet by Haley Thorne. In the room, only Tom Duyer and Jang Tony remained, and a silence fell around them. Tom Duyer picked up a bright red shrimp. Her fingers, though looking short and chubby due to the meat, were still nimble. After peeling the first one, Tom Duyer took the second and continued to peel, her gaze stopping on Jang Tony. Today he was still dressed all in black, looking extremely cold. Sitting to his right, Tom Duyer could clearly see the flawless, unblemished right side of Jang Tony's face. The man had a prominent nose, sharp features, and a perfectly attractive face. Even though she had seen many male celebrities, she couldn't help but admit that none had a face as beautiful as his. All attention was on the scar on Jang Tony's face, so she instinctively overlooked how dazzling his previous appearance must have been. "If you keep staring, just leave." Jang Tony's voice was very cold. He was blind, but he hadn't lost any of his other senses. He could clearly feel the other person's piercing gaze on him. Tom Duyer wasn't angry. Instead, she found it amusing. This man was both ugly and blind, with a bad temper. Why are you so petty? Can I look at you? Tom Duyer placed a peeled shrimp in a bowl, her voice light. You're so handsome. And since you're my legal husband, what's wrong with me looking at you? Tom Duyer had made her way in the entertainment industry, not just by relying on her looks and acting skills, but also with her smooth-talking skills. As long as she wanted, she could elevate others to the heavens. She wasn't lying to Jang Tony. She genuinely liked his face. The scar that others found fierce and disgusting, terrifying and intimidating, was insignificant in her eyes. In the past, she had been much more severely burned than Jang Tony, and when she had pus, it was even more repulsive. Shut up. Jang Tony's expression was emotionless, not believing a word Tom Duyer said. A person who was so afraid of him that they only dared to sleep on the sofa every night, and who secretly complained that he had a face that was frightening, was now saying this. Didn't she find it funny? Tom Duyer pouted. This person really didn't understand the nuances of affection. Seeing the little short legs stepping inside, Tom Duyer waved her hand at the little boy. Little Leo, come here quickly. The shrimp is all peeled. Jang Tony's little chubby face had lost all color. He looked up, his big eyes unable to hide their fear. What's wrong? Tom Dyer's gaze was very gentle. Children are the simplest beings and cannot hide anything. The fear in the little guy's eyes was very clear to her. Just now in the bathroom, I don't know how a cockroach appeared, and the little master got scared. It's okay, little master, there's nothing to worry about. I've chased the cockroach away. You should eat your meal quickly. Haley Thorne casually pushed Jang Tony's back with her hand. Jang Tony lowered his head and returned to his seat. You're a little man. You don't need to be afraid of cockroaches. Just step on it and crush it. Tom Duyer reached out to pat his little head, but in the next moment, the little guy directly swatted her hand away. In Jang Tony's eyes, there was not only disgust, but also fear. However, the child was too small. Fear took the upper hand, and his big eyes quickly turned red. Tom Duyer withdrew her hand, but wasn't actually angry. She knew the little one disliked her, and changing that wouldn't happen overnight. This afternoon, I'll have everyone clean the house, so you don't need to be afraid. The shrimp has already been peeled, so eat up. Tom Duyer placed a small bowl in front of Jang Tony. His eyes, glistening with tears, glanced at her before he lowered his head in silence and continued eating. But he didn't touch the bowl of shrimp even once. Stay a bit longer. A cold voice suddenly rang out. Tom Duyer looked over. Jang Tony was speaking to the little one. Jang Tony lifted his small head, his dark eyes blankly staring at Jang Tony. Tom Duyer thought the father and son wanted to have a chat, so she instructed Haley Thorne to quickly clear the food off the table and go outside, as she had things to do too. Once the door was closed, the room immediately became quiet. Because the curtains had been drawn open by Tom Duyer, the scent of sunlight wafted through the air. Come here. Jang Tony sat in the chair, his tall figure imposing even while seated. The little guy on the chair fidgeted a bit, then jumped down his short legs, taking him over to Jang Tony. His chubby little hand carefully tugged at Jang Tony's shirt. Daddy. He looked up, his big eyes blinking. Jang Tony lowered his head, his dark eyes unfocused. What happened just now? Jang Tony was afraid of nothing. How could he be scared of a cockroach? Daddy. Jang Tony furrowed his brows tightly, his small mouth moving as he hesitated, unsure if he could tell Daddy. Go ahead and speak. The little guy didn't know how to lie. Since Daddy was asking, Jang Tony carefully looked at Jang Tony and answered in a soft voice. How hurts? Originally, he wanted to be a brave little man, so he held back his tears, but facing his favorite Daddy, the little guy immediately felt wronged. Even though he knew Daddy couldn't see, he lifted his shirt and pointed to the bruise on his body that had turned red from being pinched. Daddy, how hurts? Jang Tony's handsome brows slightly furrowed. Where does it hurt? My stomach, sister pinched. Although the little one was only 3 years old, he was very smart and had a good memory. He recounted what Haley Thorne had said in a soft voice to Jang Tony. Meanwhile, Tom Duyer had left the villa and rushed to the other villa to find Mr. Jang. You want to uproot all the flowers in the garden and plant bamboo instead? Mr. Jang sat behind his desk, his hair completely white, but his sharp eyes were now carefully observing Tom Duyer. He was not pleased with this granddaughter-in-law. If it hadn't been for the scandal she caused, putting pressure on the Jang family, she would have had no chance of marrying Jang Tony. That's right, Grandpa. There are so many mosquitoes from the flowers there. I want to turn it into a bamboo grove. How elegant that would be. She didn't believe Mr. Jang didn't know about Jang Tony's pollen allergy, But since he knew and still ignored the beautiful garden, Tom Duyer couldn't help but think deeply. The books described the old master as someone who valued the male lead and was quite satisfied with the female lead. But Mr. Jang had never mentioned Jang Tony, who was always recuperating in the villa. Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll make sure the workers are gentle and won't disturb Jang Tony's recovery. Besides, Jang Tony stays in his room all day and doesn't go outside. If I change it to a bamboo grove, he probably won't mind. After evaluating Tom Duyer, Mr. Jang's face showed a bit more smile. If you like it, then instruct the butler to arrange for the workers. Thank you, Grandpa. When the bamboo grove is finished, I'll invite you over for tea. Tom Duyer, with a round face and cheerful smile, looked quite silly. Mr. Jang chuckled and nodded. All right, all right. After Tom Duyer left, she immediately went to find the butler to arrange for workers to start the project today. After everything was settled, Tom Dyer's mood improved significantly. Jang Tony, being cooped up in his room all day, must be bored to death. She was working hard like this, not hoping for him to be proud, just wishing he'd be in a better mood so he wouldn't be angry as much, which would mean she wouldn't have to suffer as much. However, before Tom Duyer could return to the Little Yang villa, she began to feel a headache, and the notification rang again. Anger value, 40. Tom Duyer gasped in pain. That man Jang Tony, she had just left for a moment. Who provoked him? Inside the house, the sunlight outside shimmered on the ground, creating soft circles of light. At this moment, standing in front of Jang Tony, Haley Thorne felt a chill all over, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She hadn't expected to be discovered by Jang Tony. Having worked at the Jang family for a while, she knew Jang Tony didn't care much for this son. He could be said to be raising him with a hands-off approach. As for Tom Duyer, there was no need for more words. She despised Jang Duyer to death, and several times she had heard Tom Duyer call this illegitimate child a bastard. Even if Tom Duyer knew about this, the other party would probably just look down on it and pretend not to know. Therefore, she was not afraid. Duyer called this illegitimate child a bastard. Even if Tom Duyer knew about this, the other party would probably just look down on it and pretend not to know. Therefore, she was not afraid. After all, where did the problem arise? How could Jang Tony have discovered it? Haley Thorne looked up at the small hand tugging at the hem of Jang Tony's shirt. Upon seeing her gaze, the child shrank back into Jang Tony's side. Young Master Jang Tony, I was forced. Haley Thorne knew that denying it in front of Jang Tony would be useless. After all, children do not lie. She just needed to shift the blame onto Tom Duyer, as the entire Jang family knew that Tom Duyer did not like Jang Duyer. I was just following the instructions of young Mistress Tom Duyer. If I don't comply with her wishes, I will be fired. As soon as she finished speaking, Tom Duyer happened to walk into the room. What happened? Tom Dyer's tone was somewhat anxious, her head pounding painfully. Haley Thorne hadn't expected Tom Duyer to appear just then. Her expression changed in an instant, but fortunately, Jang Tony was blind and couldn't see it. Young mistress, what you instructed was discovered by young Master Jang Tony. I beg you, please don't make me do this again. Even if you want to fire me, I will accept it. Haley Thorne struck first. What did I instruct you to do? Tom Duyer squinted, assessing Haley Thorne, who was speaking nonsense in front of her. You said the little master was naughty, and to punish him. Did I tell you to punish Chu How? Tom Duyer noticed that Jang Duyer was anxiously hiding behind Jang Tony, revealing only half of his chubby body. Tom Duyer roughly understood what had happened. It seemed the little one had gotten into trouble, and Jang Tony was angry. Did she hit you? Tom Duyer directly asked Jang Duyer. Jang Duyer frowned tightly, tugging at Jang Tony's shirt, and indignantly scolded Tom Duyer, which, with his father present, How was no longer afraid of her. How did you punish the boy? Tom Duyer approached Haley Thorne, her voice pleasant yet laced with coldness. This wasn't right. Haley Thorne looked at Jang Tony's expressionless face, his dark, gloomy eyes, and then at Tom Duyer, who was questioning her. She pinched How. Jang Duyer said angrily, and after speaking, he deliberately lifted his shirt to reveal a bruise on his small belly. You pinched the boy. Tom Duyer had seen news reports before about nannies who, dissatisfied with their employers, took out their frustrations on the employer's children, subtly abusing them. She never thought something like this could happen to someone close to her. You're very cruel. If you're dissatisfied with me, just say it directly. Why resort to such tactics to tarnish my reputation? Tom Dyer's gaze was frosty. It's one thing for adults to use underhanded methods to achieve their own goals. I feel there's nothing wrong with that. After all, everyone has ambitions and schemes. But if you use those tactics on an innocent child, her voice carried a hint of ruthlessness, then that is simply inhumane. I was just following your orders. Haley Thorne's tone was panicked. her hands unconsciously clenching. She felt that Tom Duyer had changed. Clearly, in the past, she was foolish and lacked intelligence, only knowing how to cry and shout when faced with problems. Who was Tom Duyer? Having been in the entertainment industry for so long, what kind of struggles and schemes did she not know? Jang Tony, about this, I don't know. I didn't like Chiu Hao before, but I wouldn't stoop so low as to vent my anger on child. Moreover, my heart isn't so malicious. Furthermore, even if I wanted to do something, I wouldn't instruct someone who doesn't like me. Tom Duyer didn't know if Jang Tony would trust her, but she still wanted to explain a bit. I will handle this. After a long pause, Jang Tony slowly spoke. What did that mean? Was it trust or distrust? Young master, it was really young mistress who instructed me. Jang Tony's expression remained impassive, showing no concern. Haley Thorne felt a surge of panic inside her, a chill running down her spine. I was wrong. It was young mistress, really young mistress. Originally, she had been pleased with herself, thinking she could vent her frustrations and harm Tom Duyer, but she never expected this matter to suddenly be exposed. Now, Haley Thorne was extremely anxious. She saw Jang Tony making a phone call, and soon after, several people in black arrived. Tom Duyer was momentarily stunned, then felt very satisfied. So did he trust her? She felt that this man, Jang Tony, was quite reliable. At least he wouldn't doubt her character based on what others said. Daddy. Jang Dine looked at Haley Thorne being taken away, his delicate features scrunched up with worry. She can't leave. If she does, no one will take care of Daddy. Daddy doesn't need anyone to take care of him. Jang Tony lowered his head, looking at Jang Dine. The little one had big, round eyes, his brows tightly knitted. He knew that Daddy couldn't see and needed someone to help him pour water, help him bathe, help him tidy up the room. Dine also wanted to take care of Daddy, but he was still too small. The headache hadn't stopped, and the ringing in his head persisted. Tom Duyer knew Jang Tony was still angry. She walked over, half squatting in front of Jang Dine, reaching out to pat his small head. Does your little belly still hurt? Let me take a look. Jang Dine quickly grabbed his shirt with his small hands, his face showing a bit of fear and shyness as he softly said, "Boys can't show their bellies." Tom Duyer couldn't help but chuckle, gently coaxing, "I just want to see if the injury is serious so I can apply some medicine." Then she reached out to lift his shirt. Jang Dine couldn't escape her grasp. Tom Duyer lifted his shirt to reveal his soft, fair belly, with a few spots of pink where he had likely been pinched not long ago, not yet turning dark. Jang Dine was displeased, pouting his small lips, his eyes filled with resistance towards Tom Duyer. "It's nothing serious." Tom Duyer adjusted his clothes. "Daddy will have someone to take care of him." Jang Dine's dark eyes widened in disbelief. Tom Duyer looked over at Jang Tony. "Auntie is your father's wife, so of course, she will take care of him." Anger level, 0. The loud ringing of the bell suddenly disappeared. Tom Duyer looked at Jang Tony in disbelief. Was this person really that easy to persuade? Inside, Tom Duyer felt a flicker of joy. Jang Tony's chubby little arm clutched his shirt tightly, his big eyes filled with both fear and surprise as he looked at Tom Duyer, occasionally sniffing. "Daddy?" The little one looked up at Jang Tony. "No need." Jang Tony's tone was indifferent. "What? Do you still want to find another woman to serve and take care of you?" Tom Duyer stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I don't want you how to be mistreated a second time. Moreover, about what just happened, didn't you choose to trust me? It shows that you still think highly of my character." Jang Tony's thin lips curled slightly, carrying a hint of sarcasm. "I don't trust your character. It's just that her voice was panicked, her words contradicting each other, clearly indicating she was lying. The blind often have a more sensitive perception than ordinary people, and he was an exceptional one, easily picking up on the panic in Haley Thorne's voice, the rapid speech betraying her desire to cover up her actions with lies. Tom Duyer, having done nothing wrong, remained calm. Tom Duyer widened her eyes. Was he really relying on his hearing to distinguish who was lying? Wasn't it because he trusted her? "So, when I said I would take care of you, you weren't angry anymore." Tom Duyer looked at Jang Tony with a frown. "I saw that you weren't angry." She wasn't sure if it was because Jang Tony had always stayed indoors, but his skin was indeed pale. At that moment, he frowned, his unscarred face showing a hint of mockery, yet also a bit lazy. Others said Jang Tony's looks were ruined and grotesque, but Tom Duyer felt he wasn't that bad. "Do you think someone like that is worth my anger?" Fine, it was her own sentimentality. In the afternoon, the sun was a bit intense. Such weather was best suited for a nap in bed. Tom Duyer got up from the sofa. The butler had brought over a dozen workers who were waiting in the yard. "First, pull out all the weeds in the garden. Not a single flower should be left." Tom Duyer stood under the shade of a tree, speaking to the butler. "Understood." Is there anything else you'd like to instruct, young madam? Tom Duyer looked towards the old swing on the grass, where Jang Tony often placed Rao Tom, pushing it with all his might. She thought for a moment, check if that swing is still safe, then paint a new layer of paint, the color, a light blue. I'll have him get started right away. The butler had worked at the Jang family for more than half his life. He clearly understood what kind of person Jang Tony was. Even though Jang Tony was now like a tiger that had lost its forest, his attitude remained unchanged, treating Tom Duyer with respect. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Truong. It's my duty, young Madam Tom. After finishing her instructions, Tom Duyer walked over to Jang Tony, quietly standing by and watching the little one play on the swing with Rao Tom. Jang Tony looked up, saw Tom Duyer, and pouted, turning away to face the other way, refusing to interact. The witch is here. Tom Duyer smiled, but said nothing. After a long while, the little one couldn't help but look up, gazing at Tom Duyer with confusion. His dazed eyes immediately caught sight of Tom Dyer's smiling lips. Jang Tony froze, his little face looking unusually silly. Do you want me to pick you up and help you play on the swing? Tom Duyer asked. Jang Tony's eyes instantly sparkled, filled with longing. But the next second, he looked at Tom Duyer with caution and fear, pouting his little mouth, hugging Rao Tom off the swing, and scampering away with his small white body. How wanted to play, but he had to hold back. He didn't believe the witch could be that kind-hearted. In the evening, after taking a shower, Tom Duyer sat on the sofa, watching Jang Tony rummaging through the wardrobe for clothes. After a while, Jang Tony's expression grew increasingly grim. Didn't you say you were my wife and wanted to fulfill your duties as a wife? Jang Tony spoke to Tom Duyer. I remember you rejected me today. Tom Duyer lazily lay on the sofa, enjoying the sight of Jang Tony's frustrated expression. Jang Tony fell silent, grabbing a towel and feeling his way toward the bathroom. Tom Duyer pouted. Anyway, her head didn't hurt, and she couldn't hear the bell, which meant he wasn't angry. She waited for him to take the initiative to ask for help, to avoid being overly sentimental and mocked by him again. Tom Duyer rubbed her belly, wondering if it was just her imagination, but it seemed like the flesh on her belly had decreased a bit. Tom Duyer squinted, got up, and weighed herself. The day before, she had to have weighed over 150 pounds. Seeing that number was like a bullet straight to the heart. Previously, she had always maintained a weight of 90 pounds and was even criticized for being too thin. Who would have thought that, after crossing over, she had gained so much weight? 10 pounds in China equals 5 kilograms in Vietnam, meaning Tom Duyer currently weighs over 75 kilograms, while before crossing over, she was 40 kilograms. This was the first time she had a weight in the 3-digit range. Tom Duyer took a deep breath and stepped on the scale. The next second, she opened her eyes wide, seeing that she was about 5 pounds lighter than the day before. So she really had lost weight, and it wasn't just an illusion. Tom Duyer felt both happy and puzzled. Although she had eaten very lightly today, and her appetite was small, there was absolutely no way she could lose nearly 5 pounds in a day. Was the scale broken? Tom Duyer couldn't help but touch her belly again, planning to find another scale tomorrow to weigh herself again.